Hi, my name's Tim Hollenshade. I'm here with Barry Huneke of Anderson Auto Group. In pursuit of what you've known us for at this point is telling the industry stories locally here in the area. And Barry's is one that we absolutely wanted to capture. So Barry, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Over a dozen years ago, I was a student in your class. Barry, we wanted to capture the story because when we surveyed many of the membership, your name came up over and over again as someone who's truly bridged the gap as the shop foreman. You've grown businesses in independent locations. You've been successful in the dealer side of things, the OEM. You've taught and you've been involved hands-on as an educator. That is a unique combination. So what got you into the industry?
When I was growing up, I had an interest in mowers and lawn mowers, riding tractors and stuff. So I would work with those people in the neighborhood. When I was, 14, I decided that I wanted to be a mechanic, and I went to trade school for that at Eastern Technical High School down in Essex. I graduated from there and started my first job with one of the other students in the school whose dad owned a car dealership when I was 17. And 35 years later, I went from being a service tech to their shop foreman, parts person, warranty, everything, you name it. I ran the back half of the dealership for them. From there, then went to a Toyota dealership. From there, I went to a GM dealership for 7 years, got my GM World Class. Now I'm over at Anderson Automotive working there. And in the meantime, I was already teaching at Catonsville Community College with the automotive technology. Made the decision to go there, and as times changed and my back got better, I went back to work at the dealership. When I started, it was 70 model cars with points, condensers, carburetors. We went up through fuel injection, basic computer stuff, now the high pressure injection, and one of the electric vehicles now that I'm working on. So throughout the career, it started with the basic stuff and had to self-teach yourself because a lot of these colleges and opportunities that people have now weren't there. So it was all being self-taught through looking in manuals and learning that way, as opposed to watching videos and going to college for it because it just didn't exist then.
So let's stay on the education first. Yours is a pretty tried and true model in that you were at a Votech back then, which was much more common. What was the motivator at that age? Was it inter-family motivator, or you?
No, it's just I enjoyed tinkering on stuff, and I thought it looked like a good career. I had a friend that decided we were going to go, so you had to have good grades and you were actually chosen to go there. It wasn't like you could just apply. You could apply, but they picked 20 people to be in that class. It was a very educational experience because not only did we do auto mechanics, we did courses on hydraulics, pneumatics, body shop, machine shop. So it was a complete program. And then you got to kind of choose after your first year which of those you wanted to stay with. You could change if you wanted, but I stayed with the automotive side.
At a higher level, what do you remember experience of that program at that age?
I think the thing that struck me the most was, in our senior year, we got an engine to work on. She completely disassembled the engine, ground the valves, did a valve job on them, put the whole thing back together. After a couple of weeks, and flames would come out and, all kind of stuff, but you learned a lot through it. And at the time, Plymouth had a troubleshooting contest, and our school was involved in that. We're the ones that scored the best and got to go to the troubleshooting contest, which I believe at the time was held down in Catonsville.
You mentioned in the intro that you went straight to industry then. How was that transition at that time? That's a critical transition, leaving the early age education, high school, and stepping into the ranks of a professional technician at that age.
Yeah, we did have it was a small shop. It was a used car dealership with a small repair shop. We had to inspect our own cars, fix anything that the folks brought them back for. But right off the bat with engines, brakes, transmissions.
Was there a shop foreman that you kind of mentored?
He was more like a mentor that worked with me. The training that we got out of that school coming in was very beneficial to get me to the point where within a year I had my state inspector's license. Okay. And I was inspecting cars when I was 19 years old. Maybe 2 years out of high school, I was already ASE certified, 8 different things, whatever the classification that is.
Completing that many ASEs, that doesn't happen anymore. So was it self-paced, self-guided study at that point?
I remember that we have different segments, almost like we have over at Catonsville now in the global program, where it's following the ASE stuff. So we'd spend time doing transmissions, we'd spend time doing brakes, we'd spend time doing electrical. We'd take apart a GM alternator, and you had time to see how fast you could get it done as a little competition in the class.
So we're headed towards the topic of the change, right? So it's not a certain way anymore. You've bridged the generation gap in your way, and I feel like there's some ways that I'm kind of a child of the past of the industry. I saw it early, at least in an age window, and I followed the racing or something that always kind of kept me tied into the industry. A lot's changed. That transition that you mentioned going straight, that's one that we're seeing come back. It seems like high school students are joining the industry now at a higher rate and foregoing the community college route. To us, it's important for them to continue learning at the college level and in the detail, the depth of the curriculum with the structure. That's a hard transition to make. It's much harder now. It's unique to this industry that an entry-level job bears so much risk to the business, the vehicle.
Definitely harder as a technician to understand how the systems operate.
The skill set and the hurdle now is, I think, steeper. It's steeper than it's ever been. So it's important. The entry-level criteria is more difficult. At the same time, we've talked before, the schools had to introduce 2 extra classes like the 100 level to try to get the base of the class and the candidates up to speed with some tool knowledge and things that don't necessarily all aren't related to the car side. So what do you feel is going right and wrong with how that transition's handled?
So a couple of things that I've seen where we're at now is the manufacturers, as far as a dealership, has a lot of information for you to get at to use if you decide to use it the way it's designed. A lot of folks coming in either don't want to use it or they're not competent in using it, and they just want to look on their phone and look at a YouTube video on how to fix something, which has its advantages, but it's not everything there that you need to
Definitely some
know.
advantages.
That's one of the big issues that we have, is that people come in and they spend a lot of time on their phone, either looking at websites or decide doing this and that. I had a fellow tell me, new hire that we had, like in his first week, he said to me, "If you need me, I'll be outside." I said, "If I got to go out to find you, I don't need you." So getting that mentality through, that it's not instant gratification. You're not going to start out at a high dollar figure. You have to work your way up through that. And now most people want that instant gratification, to be making a ton of money right off the bat. And it's not going to happen. You have to work your way still up through the ranks where you can make hours. Everything's flat rates. You have to be good at what you're doing and not make mistakes. And it's a hard process to learn, but everything's available to you. In the aftermarket world, it's harder to get that information. A lot of folks have it, but it's not quite the same as what you can get in the dealership. The other thing at a dealership is everything's pretty much the same. You're at your independent shop, you're getting every brand of car that comes in the door. So with having the independent shop experience, when I eventually went to the dealership, it's a benefit to you to have all that extra knowledge than somebody that just works on a GM or on a Honda or on a Ford, because you don't have that outside influence on you. Same thing as they're all just nuts and bolts. You can't let them intimidate you. You just got to follow through and go on what your knowledge tells you.
We see a lot of talented technicians or ones that are motivated. They follow the higher pay and not where they might be most appropriate for that stage of their career. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing. I always encourage them to think about where they would be in 5 years or something like that, because you and I know how much somebody who's motivated can develop their skill set.
Right.
And 5 years is like an eternity in a perspective. So back to that level of focus, we've talked about trying to rekindle the viewpoint of what a professional is. I always bring up with the students or young entry-level technicians that everybody gets bit by a car or has a job that went well a handful of times or once or twice, not go well the third time. And to not be discouraged by that, but by being a professional means that you're going to figure out why it happened. What have you seen the nature of the professionalism and all that? And where do you feel we are now compared to the past? I mean, there's other ways the industry in the past was not professional. So speak to maybe those changes.
Yeah, so what I kind of see is that, like you were saying, motivation is a key factor in it. We have guys that come in that are good techs, but they don't wear their uniform that signifies where they are. They'd rather advertise for maybe the tool truck than the company that they work for, which kind of irks me a little bit, because these are the folks that are paying you. And if a customer comes in and they want to see the professionalism that way too. Our shop has a big bay door right where the customers are, and they can look in So if the bays are a mess or it's cluttered up, that professionalism isn't there. And it's like, would I want my car going back there in that trash heap? I want it to be clean when I want to get it back. So motivating people to keep their stuff up to date, keep their tools up to date, wash their hands when they get done working on the car, and just knowing that it shines back on them. It only takes one person that you mess up with that you can't take care of to put a blacklist out on all the social media now that could really damage your shop and your reputation. Having the people know working for you that's all included in what they're doing is something that they need to be aware of. In the past, it wasn't looked upon on that professionalism. Like, if I'm making 100 grand a year, I want to prove to people that that's the type of person that I am, that I can make that because I'm that well motivated and trained in what I'm doing.
One of the critiques of the time now is that cars have gotten really complex. We're talking about professionalism, and one thing we look for is verifying a repair. As a shop foreman, we get to look at cars and make our assessment of why we feel that it came back. And one of the things that I'm sure you catch many times is that there was an opportunity to know that the car was or wasn't good before, like mode 6 data or built-in drive cycle monitor test and things like that. When we have cars come back, there's certain situations where we know that effectively a step was skipped. Some of that goes into training too.
Difficult because working flat rate doesn't pay you for doing all those checks afterwards. It's to fix the car with, like, say you sold a drivability part, you get paid for putting that on. There's no time included for the after test. I think that flat rate's a good system to keep people motivated, but it's not a good system as far as making sure that everything's right, because everybody's just trying to make the hours. So I think something may need to be done professionally through the industry to have some way of maybe changing flat rate up a little bit, somewhere you have a way of spending the extra time to do it without penalizing yourself to do that.
My viewpoint of the flat rate, because we've done everything, we've never been a flat rate facility, and we very much understand the motivation. That's why we're here as hands-on as we are, and it can be frustrating at times to have to constantly push people. I think it would change the way the car gets looked over, in that if you had a pecking order of if it were our car or what really needs to be done for the best interest of the car, and then if it's looked at through a flat rate lens, that order changes. What we're encouraging is that holistic car approach. Like you said, the multiple makes and models, each one has their nuance. It doesn't have to be a complete bind checklist. That's the other part that we worry about. The checklist in some ways is dumbed down.
It limits you.
Yeah, you're not checking off a list that's green and there's something over here in the gap. And if somebody spends long enough in that structure, in that workflow, they get numb to it or lazy to it, or that stimuli that you said about the complexity of the cars and being engaged and all the difficulty, some of that's lost.
Right. So, I would agree with that wholly.
Where do you feel like the industry is now with the electric cars? I mean, you're certified on the electric Hummer, so you carry the badge for a major manufacturer.
Yeah, Hummers and the Prologues, and the Hondas we work on are hybrids too, so they still have the batteries in them. I think the all electric is a ways off yet, but a hybrid definitely is something that's feasible and doable that we're using a lot of now. Until we get more electric charging stations, electric capability, it's still going to be a challenge. It's also the materials that you need to build the car in the first place. They build these, like a Hummer might weigh 6,000 pounds. Regular parking garages are built for cars that may be 2,000 pounds. So if you fill a parking garage with Hummers, would it collapse? Because it's not designed for it. Same with bridges and whatever else. If you buy one and you don't have a garage, you have to have a charging station at the curb. Would a community association let you put a charging station along the curb in front of your house? Maybe not. So a lot of hurdles to get through before it's going to be really feasible to use them. And with a 300-mile range, I'd rather have the hybrid where you gas it up and drive. The engine helps charge the vehicle, runs off the engine sometimes, runs off the battery, top it back off the gas, and 2 minutes you're down the road again. I think it's still going to be a viable alternative in the future, but for right now, we still need that mesh of both of them to keep everybody moving.
For sure. So last one, I guess, and then you cover anything you want, is what traits do you feel, all things considered, COVID changed a lot, and you're back deep in it, pushing the envelope. What traits do you feel are the best to succeed for technicians in the early stage of their career?
A couple things. One, be able to read. It sounds basic, but you have to be able to read and understand what you're doing. Number two, learn math. Your mathematical skills with reading micrometers, know what you need to do with that is essential. Four is to know electrical stuff. Anybody can change oil, anybody can do brakes, but the guy that can do electrical, that can diagnose electrical malfunctions, anything computer diagnostic, you need that electrical to be able to test circuits, voltage drop, any of that stuff is very imperative to a quality technician now. You can get anybody to change oil, but to be able to make that leap from being a lube tech to being a line technician, they're the type of things you need to know. And until you're at that point, you can't move up through the system. So those are very specific things that I tell everybody when I was teaching, to make sure you spend time on the electrical. The diagnostic stuff all bends back to electrical diagnosis. That would be what my recommendations are.
It's a dynamic time right now with the electric vehicles and all that. There's tons of opportunity for people that are motivated.
Right. Most of the guys that are good at what they do aren't leaving the dealership where they're at. And the ones that are jumping around because they can't hack it where they're at. Because if you're good, you make the money. You can do the hours, you can turn the hours, you can make the good money.
And this industry is much more professional than it's ever been, and all for the better. Still a culture shock from a school classroom to an industrial environment, a high pace, high production.
Yeah, it's very, very high paced.
There's one of the feedbacks we get from doing these same interviews with students is the first time some real expectations were levied on them, and somebody was following up with them and being proactive about holding them accountable, not just letting them sink and then catching on to it a month later. What we watch is those who want it. It's obvious with their intent and their motivation is sincere, and they're disciplined and regimented, and they're open-minded to take the advice of experienced personnel around them that are trying to give them good advice. They'll do fine, but it's one that demands persistent effort and work.
Right, working fast and making sure you do it the same way every time. We have a lot of schedules set up for how to do an oil change and how to do your multi-point, and as long as you're repetitive and do the same thing time after time after time, you'll succeed because it's in your head with what you do. You won't wind up leaving an oil cap off or leaving a wheel loose, and you just have to have that system diagnostic set in your head to do it all the time.
Process, you can tweak the process to improve it. But if the process is inconsistent, any hope and improvement
is not going to be there.
Barry, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, and
thank you.
Hopefully, we'll get some good people coming out of these programs and move on.
There's a lot of good educators that are trying really hard.
And to be honest with you, where I'm working at now, we can't hire people that are qualified to do the jobs we need. And it's a shame because the work's there for it. We have openings, but the people coming in are not qualified or they're not motivated enough to want to do it. So